Welcome back to the Locked On Red Sox podcast. Thank you so much for making Locked On Red Sox your first listen every single day. I'm your host, Massachusetts Pirates team insider Jake Ignaszewski. I'm also joined here by my co-host, NESN writer Lauren Campbell. And in this episode, we are going to be talking about the possibility of Red Sox DH and sometimes outfielder JD Martinez potentially getting traded now that there is a rule change of the universal DH in the MLB. We'll also be touching on as well how the possibility of Kyle Schwarber being re-signed has windowed a little bit and maybe is a little bit smaller with this rule change.
You are Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
So in the last episode, we gave you a little bit of a rundown on what's going on in the CBA negotiations between the MLB and the MLB Players Association. And one of those things that has been confirmed is that there will be a universal DH starting during the 2022 season. And one thing that is really interesting to think about is how does this potentially hurt the Red Sox's chances to re-sign outfielder Kyle Schwarber, as well as does this bring up the possibility of JD Martinez being traded either before the season starts or during the trade deadline? And real quick, I think that this is a great idea. And believe me, I understand that I am not very well represented with this opinion, but I want another hat. I want another shirt. If you're looking at the video version right now, believe me, I want the Red Sox to have champagne problems. I want a 2022. I'm wearing the 2018 hat. I want another World Series hat as anybody else in Boston does, but I want to be like the Dodgers. And that's how Chaim Bloom, I believe, is looking at this team. He said in his press conference that he wants to have longevity of success in Boston. And I believe that with this rule change, Martinez's value, his trade value couldn't be higher as it is right now. And if you think about wanting to trade him during the trade deadline, teams are going to be getting a 3-month rental. And we saw how that worked out for a team like the Cubs with Javier Baez and Chris Bryant. So I think that this is the best time for them to trade him right now.
There's definitely a lot of pros and cons to the trade. I think that it is a risk for both the Red Sox and the team that would trade for him, because you don't know exactly what you're getting, especially if this lockout continues into May or June. Hopefully that does not happen. But you think if he gets traded before the season, his contract, I think is pretty tradable. Like you said, he would be a rental, whether they trade him at the trade deadline or at the beginning of the season. And he had a good season last year, 286, 28 homers, just shy of 100 RBI with 99. He had a really good postseason too. And I think it's kind of like Kyle Schwarber, where now his market is a lot more open. Having that good postseason is going to help. However, I don't know if the Red Sox would really be wanting to trade JD Martinez. I mean, there was a lot of talk about him opting into his deal, almost $20 million. That is a lot for a DH, an aging DH at that. He is 35, or he'll be 35 when the season starts. And yeah, it's money they could save, but also, is he going to warrant something to come back to the Red Sox that's worth trading him? Does the team get better with prospects or maybe another rental kind of player to maybe make a run? Or does getting rid of JD Martinez make your team worse? And the production, there's no denying his production. The last few years he's been with the Red Sox, he was huge in 2018 when they brought him over, and they obviously won the World Series in 2018. But much like Alex Cora, and I've said this about Alex Cora, JD Martinez is so valuable to this team as a leader and as somebody who can connect to players. He's so helpful to Rafael Devers, to Xander Bogaerts. Do you hear how JD Martinez will take people aside and be like, hey, here's what's wrong with your swing. Hey, here's something I'm noticing. comes out and says he's a trained hitter. He goes through his iPads. He records his batting practice with 3 different iPads so he can get all the different angles. He's so involved in such a baseball maniac that he wants to be perfect, and he wants to bring that perfection down to the other players and his teammates. And that's something that obviously we don't really see on the field, and we don't really see it as fans, but that's somebody very valuable to this team. Do you want to give that up? I mean, I hate being that person that's like, well, it depends what you get. But if there's a gun to my head and you're telling me, do you trade JD Martinez, yes or no? I'm saying no.
I see exactly what you're saying, especially in terms of the value, not looking at the money part of it, but what he really means to the team. And we even heard it when he first came on the Red Sox in 2018, the impact that he had on former Red Sox player Mookie Betts. And I think the age factor, it is going to hurt his trade value, and with him being a rental, it will hurt his trade value. But especially with this rule change, I think it opens it up to 15 more potential teams that will be interested. Now, I'm not saying that all 15 teams would be interested. I think maybe 8 of them would be interested. In my mind, I think of teams like the Brewers, the Dodgers, the Padres, Cardinals, Braves, Phillies, Mets, and maybe even the Giants as well. But we're seeing a lot of NL teams now starting to do their homework on who will be my DH next season, and we've seen a lack of quality DH options in the NL, mainly because of roster management and prioritizing versatility and defense due to there not being a universal DH. And so I think, like I said before, I think that this is the perfect opportunity if the Red Sox were going to trade him, that they would. And we've also seen that Chaim Bloom isn't a guy who is afraid to trade not only fan favorites, but good players. We saw what he obviously did with Mookie Betts. We saw what he obviously did with Andrew Benintendi. And I think if Chaim sees the value, if he sees that it's going to be able to help the team not only upgrade this season, but down the line, I think that he's going to pull the trigger.
I mean, I would not put it past Chaim Bloom to do something like this. I mean, we just saw him trade for JBJ and get rid of Hunter Renfroe right minutes before the lockout began. So we know that he certainly will do it. Chaim Bloom, and we've talked about him before, he's a brilliant baseball mind. He's going to get the best value, or try to get the best value for JD Martinez if that's the case. It certainly is helpful that the market opens a little bit more for him now with the universal DH, and JD Martinez can play outfield. So he does have versatility. He'll play anywhere you put him. I mean, I don't particularly like when he's in the outfield. I think that sometimes he ends up being more of a liability than a help to the team, but there is that option. So you certainly could sell it that way. And if the Red Sox are going to try to build a championship team for 2022, maybe even look more toward the future for 2023, when JD Martinez may not even be here. His contract obviously expires at the end of 2022. He may not re-sign with Boston, but maybe it's worth just getting one more year out of him, especially if you have a team that went to the ALCS last season, came within 2 games of going to the World Series. Maybe give it one more honest shot with him and then let him go get that big money elsewhere.
And I think with this, I'm looking at it less as how much money the Red Sox could save from this trade and more the value that we could get back to help fill needs outside of the DH position. And obviously, anybody on the Red Sox with their versatility can play DH. And with JD, as you talked about, like there is limitations with him in the outfield. And when you were talking about that, I was laughing a little bit because I was imagining he made a play in left field and he missed the ball and he tried to slide for it and ended up going under him. Yep. And he's just like, where's the ball? And I don't have the numbers in front of me, unfortunately, but when you look at the numbers of how he hits when he's playing DH and how he hits when he's an outfielder, they're drastically different. And he's a much better hitter when he only focuses on hitting and not fielding. And I think with the other thing that with this trade would bring is obviously the money factor. You could potentially use that money to spend on a Rafael Devers extension, or to get Suzuki from Japan, or even to bolster the bullpen a little bit more, potentially get a rotation arm. That's another subject that I would like to talk about as well. Who knows what's going to happen with the Red Sox rotation? But I think that this gives them an option to $20 million more. I really think, and we're going to talk about this in the second segment, I really think that for the people who are saying, trade JD if we can get Schwarber back, well, this rule change is sort of a double-edged sword, where you could have the opportunity to trade JD Martinez because the suitors double, but also it makes it much harder for you to re-sign Kyle Schwarber because with the same thing, the suitors double.
Yeah, and Kyle Schwarber, he listen, all the power to him for wanting to play first base and playing first base for the Red Sox last year in a position he never played. But if teams liked what he saw at the minimal games he played at first, they obviously liked his bat and liked what he did in the postseason for the Red Sox. And again, another guy who can play the outfield, who is an outfielder. And my dog does not want Kyle Schwarber to go anywhere else but the Red Sox, apparently. But I think that this definitely hurts the Red Sox chances of signing him. I know that he was very well liked here. He really took on the city, the whole Kyle from Waltham thing, and he couldn't even say Waltham correctly, like a true non-New Englander. So he was so much fun, and he really embraced being in Boston for the short time. And maybe he wants to sign here. Maybe he's like, nah, whatever. Like I want to be with the Red Sox. And like you mentioned, the Rafael Devers extension as well. I mean, he could be the DH coming in 2023. So I mean, that's a whole nother episode we can do on that. But, at the end of the day, Kyle Schwarber's market got bigger, but so did JD Martinez. And if I'm a team, I'm probably looking more at Kyle Schwarber than trying to trade for JD Martinez, because I can just sign Kyle Schwarber to a contract. I know that he can play the outfield. Maybe he can play first base in a pinch. And now if I'm a National League team, I can just sign him to be the DH. And our team just got that much better just signing him solely as a DH.
I completely agree. And, we're going to talk a little bit more on potential options for where JD Martinez could get traded, as well as a little bit more on what teams are interested in Kyle Schwarber. And then lastly, some of your guys' reactions on my thoughts of JD Martinez potentially getting traded. But Morton just wants to take a second to talk to you about Built Bar.
Sure do. I absolutely love Built Bar. You probably know that by now. And now that it's the middle of February, we are approaching March, which is very hard to believe. This is usually around the time that I am giving up on my New Year's resolutions, but I cannot do that this year. I'm getting married in less than 6 months, and I 100% need to stick to my resolution to eat right. And Built Bar helps with that 100%. And Built Bar Puffs especially help with that, because let me tell you, if you haven't tried these Built Bar Puffs, you're missing out. They're the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. So they're fluffy. Obviously, they're marshmallowy. And they're not just a protein bar. They're kind of like a little treat. And they're covered in 100% real chocolate, just like all other Built Bars. Every single Built Bar is covered in 100% real chocolate. They're low calorie. They're high protein. If you go to Built.com and check out their macro chart, you will be blown away. There are 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 grams of net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. There's mint brownie, there's coconut, my personal favorite, cookies and cream, and new for this month, white chocolate cookies and cream. So you obviously know I'm excited about that. They're all delicious, and there's new flavors coming out every single time. And we have an offer for you. Head on over to Built.com, use promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. That's LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com.
So now in this second segment, before we start it, I just want to thank you so much for making Locked On Red Sox your first listen every single day. But we are going to talk a little bit more about why the Red Sox might not be able to re-sign Kyle Schwarber. Because when you look at what John Heyman reported before the lockout even started, Schwarber has, in quotations, a huge market with the Marlins, Phillies, Red Sox, Marlins, and Rockies among the teams. Those are just the ones listed, but also one that I could see trying to snag him up is the Washington Nationals, who he formerly played for before being traded to the Red Sox. And we could see these suitors growing and growing by the minute now that this rule change has happened.
100%. And I think that it's great for Schwarber. I think that now that the market is a bit more open for him, his services will definitely be more wanted. And he is somebody who could definitely put a team over the top if he's the missing piece. If a team is just like one piece away from being a World Series contender, he's it. And he is somebody who can change the game. Look at the Red Sox. Look what he did for the Red Sox after he was acquired. And he had a very strong postseason. He had grand slams. He had hits. He had timely hits. He had RBI. He had everything. And he was everything that the Red Sox could have asked for and more. And he's obviously very, very likable. And I think that goes a long way. Obviously, you want your player to be productive. But when there's good morale there, it just makes it all the better. And you see that how quickly he took on Boston. Another team could look at that and be like, I want that kind of personality and kind of person in our next player. And like I mentioned in the first segment, he's versatile. He can play the outfield. He can solely play DH. Will he want to? I don't know. I don't talk to Kyle Schwarber. Maybe he does. Maybe they can work something out if it is a National League team where, hey, like you can play the outfielder or the outfield, but we're going to need you to play, be the DH for 65% of the games. And maybe that's something they work out in a deal. But I think that having the National League now adopt a designated hitter, that's huge for someone like Kyle Schwarber, who maybe his future was a little bit unknown when the lockout happened. And now it's like, I definitely have a better chance of getting signed pretty much almost immediately when this lockout ends.
And I think it's something as well where, you brought up the value with JD Martinez where he has on his teammates. And we saw what Kyle Schwarber did with Bobby Delbeck's approach at the plate and how much he helped him after he was traded from the Washington Nationals to the Red Sox at the trade deadline. And I think this sort of makes my point look a little bit better with the potential JD Martinez trade. I mean, if you want to try and bolster up potentially the bullpen as well as fill in that need at second base, you could potentially use JD Martinez to fill that need because there's not a ton of options currently right now on the free agent market. A few possibilities that I thought of is you could potentially trade JD Martinez maybe with a prospect for Jeff McNeil, the second baseman for the Mets. They're all in win now mode right now. And we've seen what Steve Cohen has done just in terms of spending money. He's definitely going to give the okay to go out there and try and get a win now player like JD Martinez. I also thought of potentially a deal for Josh Hader, the closer for the Brewers. I think that would be really interesting. A few other teams, like I mentioned, the teams who would be interested, but a few teams that I think that have great pitching depth as well as prospect depth that could be really good teams that would want JD Martinez is the Brewers, the Cardinals, the Padres, and the Dodgers.
Yeah, you bring up Josh Hader, which should be interesting because the Red Sox, I guess you could say technically don't have a closer, or maybe they're unsure with the closer they want to go with. Obviously, you don't know what's in store for Matt Barnes, if they're going to give him another chance, if he's going to be a setup guy. Will they go with Garrett Whitlock, which is something I am advocating for to go for him to be the closer? Or will they go out and get a legitimate closer and be like, this guy's our closer unless he gets injured? Like no way around it. This guy is our closer. Maybe, but I know that bullpen help is a must. Can they get Josh Hader if he comes in and says, hey, you're not going to close, but you're going to be a setup guy? Again, this is, maybe I'm reading way too much into this. Maybe my subconscious is like, we do not want to trade JD Martinez no matter the circumstances. But much like Kyle Schwarber, and we've said this, that it does open JD Martinez's market a lot. Maybe teams will be calling the Red Sox. Maybe they have no interest in trading him, but teams will call the Red Sox. And I'm a big proponent of, you should listen to every phone call you get for any player, no matter who it is, just to see what the package is. And you can the worst they can do is say no. So it's going to be very interesting once this lockout ends and kind of how they approach JD Martinez. Maybe they don't do anything at all. Maybe they just keep him, and this is just ends up going to be a fun episode we ended up doing just for fun's sake.
And one message that you just pointed out in your last point that I've heard Chaim Bloom echo ever since he has come over to the Red Sox, that we're going to listen to every single offer that there is out there that could potentially make our team better for the current and for the future. And I think when you look at the current options in terms of free agency at DH, I mean, they're pretty slim. I mean, you got Nelson Cruz, who's breaking 40 years old. You got Jorge Soler. You got Albert Pujols, who I don't know how much he's got left in the tank. You got Chris Davis, who used to be a big home run hitter, but isn't really that player anymore. And then also when you look at potential free agents that could maybe fill that need as well, Chris Bryant, he has a market value of $23 million. Nicholas Castellanos, he's got a market value of $21 million. Michael Conforto, $19 million, and Eddie Rosario. And the reason I put the market values there is because they're very similar to JD Martinez. And as I mentioned, this money could not only allocate for giving more money to Rafael Devers in an extension, but it could also help them bolster up not only that DH position, but you could potentially put any of those guys that I just mentioned in the outfield and then put somebody else in the DH position or make it a back and forth sort of rotation that you do depending on the pitcher that they're going against that specific night.
Yeah. And I mean, you bring up Rafael Devers again. Obviously, like I said in the beginning of this episode, there are pros to trading JD Martinez, and some of that could be using that money that you're going to inevitably save to give the contract extension to Rafael Devers that many fans have been calling for a long time. I think that part of the reason they haven't offered him an extension or one hasn't gotten done is because they don't know what his exact future will be with the Red Sox. I think it's with the Red Sox, but will it be a DH? Will it be a third baseman and DH? Because I think his value goes up a bit more if they're just bringing him back as a DH. Obviously, we know we can play third base. So again, like JD, he will be versatile. But until you kind of have a set future for him, because he's been a liability at third base sometimes, and it gets really frustrating to watch sometimes him just bobble a simple ground ball. And yes, he makes amazing plays. There's no denying that Rafael Devers is incredibly talented. But maybe he's better suited for a DH position where you keep him off the field more often than not. And then that goes to, well, he'll probably be deserving of a little bit more money if he's strictly just used for hitting and you take that liability off the field.
Yeah, it's going to be there's so many different possibilities, especially not only for this season, but 2023. And that's what makes it really exciting for us to continue to talk about this team throughout this season. But I just want to give a few fan reactions. I thought one was kind of funny from Hangover Ham. He said, trade him and get Mookie back. That's the only trade I would accept. Jim R said, not preseason. Standings in July will determine that. Mark Langner said, only if the Red Sox are out of contention can I see this happening. But one last point before we end this debate that Sammy James was talking about, specifically for Schwarber. I see Schwarber mainly looking for a 4 to 5 year deal. I don't see Chaim Bloom going for that. Sammy made a really good point that he sees Chaim Bloom only giving Schwarber 2 to 3 year deal. We've seen Chaim Bloom mainly stay away from those longer term deals. We'll probably see it with Rafael Devers or Alexander Bogaerts. But with these types of players where you don't know how they're really going to do in that over 30-year mark, like Schwarber, I could see him more going for a 2 or 3 year deal.
Yeah, that's interesting because it's funny because people will bring up like JD Martinez's age. I 100% always forget that Kyle Schwarber is like 28, 29 years old. So I think that's where the Red Sox are going to come up a bit short. Again, maybe he does want to genuinely play for the Red Sox. But this also could be Schwarber's last shot at a longer term, big money contract. I could definitely see him going for the 4 or 5, maybe 6 years. I don't know if a team will give him 6, but I definitely can see Schwarber going more for a longer term, get that kind of security. And then maybe at the end of 5 years, 33, 34 years old, maybe go for the 2 year deal with a little more money attached to it. I don't know. It's going to be very interesting. I love the speculation. I love that. I forget who said it. They said that JD won't get traded unless the Red Sox are out of contention. That's something I didn't even think of, maybe because we're spoiled Boston fans. We don't think of them missing the playoffs, but I think that's if the Red Sox are out of contention in July, I think they're pretty much going to sell the team except for Devers and Bogarts.
And we'll talk about the FanGraphs projections in a later episode, but I don't see that happening. I don't see them even coming close to the 83 wins that they projected of them. And I understand that's after the underwhelming splashes that they made before the lockout, but I just think that this team has just way too much talent. And I think it's going to be really interesting, what happens after this lockout, how the Red Sox really build up this roster for the 2022 season. But Locked On Red Sox is your number one spot to find and hear our thoughts on all that stuff. We're going to do our best throughout this season and also after the lockout ends to bring you great content as well as bring on tons of guests that have a lot of knowledge about each of these subjects. So definitely make sure you are subscribed to Locked On Red Sox, not only on YouTube, but also as well on any audio platform that you're listening to. But before we wrap it up, I just wanted to talk to you real quick about BetOnline. Football might be over for this season, but basketball is in full steam ahead for both pro and college hoops. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next fire coach is going to land, BetOnline.net is the number one spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds right to your Olympic coverage and information. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. So thank you so much for listening to this episode of Locked On Red Sox and for making Locked On Red Sox your first listen every single day. Now make your second listen Locked On Bets, your daily one-stop shop for all your gambling needs. Locked On Bets, hosted by your boy Q with expert analysis and insight from Lee Sterling. It's free and available on all platforms. And also make sure to follow Locked On Red Sox on Twitter. We try to be the most fan-engaging, not only podcast, but Red Sox Twitter account that there is out there. So go over and follow us, LO_Red Sox. Also follow myself over there on Twitter at Jake Iggy, as well as my co-host Lauren Campbell. It's at La. That's 3 laws. Lauren with 4 R's. So we really appreciate you listening to this episode. Definitely make sure to subscribe either on YouTube or whatever your audio platform you're listening to get all your Red Sox content right here on Locked On Red Sox. And we'll see you guys and talk to you guys next time. Peace.